The story of the Filipino World War II veterans and the Rescission Act is one that is often overlooked in the annals of American history. These brave men fought alongside American forces during World War II, but their sacrifices and service were ignored and forgotten for decades. The Rescission Act of 1946, which revoked many of the benefits promised to these veterans, was a dark stain on American history. This video will explore the history of the Filipino World War II veterans and the Rescission Act and discuss their legacy and impact on the Filipino-American community. The Filipino World War II veterans were soldiers from the Philippines who were enlisted in the United States Army during World War II. These soldiers fought alongside American forces in the Pacific Theater of Operations and were instrumental in the defeat of the Japanese Empire. They served in a variety of roles, including as infantrymen, medics, and support personnel. The Filipino soldiers were promised many benefits for their services, including the right to become American citizen, access to health care and education, and pensions. However, after the war, the United States government failed to fulfill these promises. The Rescission Act of 1946 revoked many of the benefits that had been promised to Filipino World War II veterans. The act declared that the service of the Filipino soldiers was not in the military or naval forces of the United States and therefore did not qualify them for benefits such as citizenship, pensions, and education. The Rescission Act was a devastating blow to the Filipino soldiers who had risked their lives to fight for freedom and democracy. Many of them were left without access to health care or education, and they struggled to make ends meet without pensions. The impact of the act was felt not only by the veterans themselves, but also by their families and communities. The Filipino-American community has long been a vital part of American society, but the legacy of the Rescission Act has had a lasting impact on their experience. The act left a sense of betrayal and mistrust towards the government that had promised so much and delivered so little. The Filipino veterans and their families continued to fight for recognition and benefits for decades, and their efforts eventually paid off. In 2009, Congress passed the Filipino Veterans Equity Compensation Act, which provided a one-time payment of Filipino World War II veterans who were still living. The act was a small but significant step towards recognizing the sacrifice and service of these brave soldiers. In 2016, the United States government granted citizenship to the surviving Filipino World War II veterans, a long overdue recognition of their contribution to American history. The legacy of the Filipino World War II veterans and the Rescission Act is a complex and multifaceted one. On one hand, the act was a betrayal of the promises made to these soldiers and their families. It denied them access to benefits and recognitions for their services and sacrifices. On the other hand, the resilience and determination of the Filipino-American community in the face of this adversity are a testament to the human spirit. The fight for recognition and compensation for the Filipino veterans was a long and difficult one, but their efforts have had a lasting impact on the Filipino-American community and on American society as a whole. We give credit to Major General Antonio Taguba for spearheading the fight to fulfill our promise to the Filipino veterans. Also to the many Filipinos who volunteered to help our veterans. As we reflect on the history of the Filipino World War II veterans and the Rescission Act, it is important to remember the sacrifices and services of these brave men. Their contribution to the defeat of the Japanese Empire and to the cause of freedom and democracy should never be forgotten. The fight for recognition and benefits for these veterans was a long and difficult one, but it serves as a reminder of the importance of standing up for justice and equality. Japanese bombers roared through American airspace on a chilly morning in December 1941. Americans took cover as a surprise attack in the Pacific, crippled by the largest concentration of American warplanes outside of North America, and sunk U.S. battleships, while air sirens wailed and guns blazed. However, this Japanese attack took place a day later across the international dateline, not on the famous date of December 7, 1941. Furthermore, the Philippines, an American possession since the Spanish-American War of 1898, was the intended target rather than Hawaii's Pearl Harbor. President Franklin D. Roosevelt vowed to protect the American Commonwealth of the Philippines following the attacks that drew the United States into the World War II. All Philippine military forces were placed under American command in the U.S. Armed Forces of the Far East earlier in the year as a result of a presidential order, and thousands of Filipinos enlisted in response to their commander-in-chief's call. Roosevelt promised Filipino soldiers the same veterans benefits provided to members of the U.S. Armed Forces because they were legally American citizens and Commonwealth citizens. In contrast to the lightning strike on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese continued their attacks on the Philippines in the weeks after the United States entered World War II. Japanese troops occupied Manila after staging an amphibious landing. Filipino combatants fought alongside American soldiers in the Battle of Bataan, which was led by General Douglas MacArthur. Filipinos were among the estimated 10,000 soldiers who died during the 60-mile death march across the Bataan Peninsula following the defeat of the Allied forces and MacArthur's escape to Australia. Filipino guerrilla forces kept fighting the Japanese occupiers in the jungles and mountains of the archipelago even after the Philippines surrender in May 1942. They resisted for 3 years before MacArthur finally drove the Japanese out with his troops after his return. The war had taken a terrible toll by the time it came to the end in 1945, including the deaths of an estimated 1 million Filipinos. Roosevelt pledged to establish the Republic of the Philippines as soon as our Japanese enemy's power was destroyed in a covert radio broadcast to the Philippines in August 1943. On July 4, 1946, Filipinos celebrated their own Independence Day as the American flags was lowered and replaced by the ensign of the newly independent Philippines, fulfilling the promise made at that time. Congress, however, quickly backtracked on yet another promise. Due to worries about its projected cost of more than $3 billion, Congress passed the Rescission Act, which retroactively revoked the benefits promised to veterans and their widows and children. President Harry Truman nevertheless signed the bill despite his reservations. Filipino veterans were still waiting for the U.S. government to fulfill that obligations more than 70 years later. While members of the old Philippine Scouts were qualified for full benefits, neither the Commonwealth Army of the Philippines, recognized guerrilla forces, nor the new Philippine Scouts have been. The 2009 American Recovery and Reinvestment Act authorized one-time lump sum payments of $15,000 to surviving Filipino veterans who were citizens of the United States and $9,000 to non-citizens. Veterans must be on both the so-called Missouri List of Veterans, which is incomplete due to a 1970 fire that destroyed millions of military records, including those of many Filipinos who served during World War II, and the list of 260,715 Filipino guerrilla fighters compiled by the federal government right after the war. The Congressional Gold Medal, the nation's highest civilian honor, was given to Filipino World War II veterans in 2017, but many are still without benefits. Their numbers are dwindling daily because many of those veterans are in their 90s. I hope you enjoyed our video for today. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to be alerted when our next video is available, please click the notification bell. Thank you and see you in our next video.